Do you believe in life after death? What if we told you right now that there are real, documented cases that prove exactly that? And if you think that nothing comes after death, and that there must be a logical explanation for everything, then we're already very curious to hear how you'll explain these 15 mysterious cases. So let's begin with the very first one. And this one will change your entire idea of life and death forever. Number 15. The shocking case of Toni Jo Henry. The following case we want to present to you actually happened, and is one of the most shocking and unsettling events in world history, viewed by many as proof of the existence of a soul and a life after death. Toni Jo Henry, a remarkable and tragic figure in American history, was executed on November 28, 1942, in the state of Louisiana in a brutal manner. She was the first woman to die in the electric chair in that state, and her life and gruesome death attracted major media attention. But this story didn't end with her horrifying execution. On the contrary, it took a mysterious and eerie turn. Toni Jo Henry, born Annie Beatrice McQuiston, grew up under extremely difficult conditions. She lost her mother early on and quickly slipped into a troubled life. Her life changed dramatically when she met and later married the dangerous criminal Claude Henry. Her relationship with Claude played a decisive role in her life and ultimately led to the fateful events that resulted in her arrest and execution. Toni Jo Henry and her husband Claude Henry planned a robbery together to get money. On Valentine's Day 1940, they stopped the Texas car dealer Joseph P. Calloway and kidnapped him. They forced him to drive them to a remote field, where Toni Jo allegedly shot Calloway. Toni Jo was arrested shortly afterward, put on trial, and sentenced to death in the electric chair for murder. Claude Henry was also arrested, but his fate was different from Toni Jo's. He wasn't convicted for the murder of Joseph P. Calloway, but for other horrific crimes. He died after the execution of Toni Jo Henry in 1945 at the age of 32 from tuberculosis, while he was in prison. On November 28, 1942, the day of her execution, Toni Jo Henry displayed remarkable calm and dignity. She did not plead for her life as she was led into the prison's execution chamber. What was also quite impressive was the fact that she remained completely calm and showed no signs of panic or fear. Before her execution, she said a prayer and appeared composed. Her final moving words expressed remorse and a desire for forgiveness. She asked that her actions be forgiven. The execution was carried out and proceeded without incident, but the real mystery began afterward. Shortly after Toni Jo's death, extremely strange events occurred near the prison. A small local radio station only a few miles away experienced a chilling disturbance. One night, when the station was supposed to be broadcasting only static noise, a woman's voice suddenly came through. What could be heard was a sorrowful voice claiming to be Toni Jo Henry. What made this event so mysterious was the inexplicable fact that there were no recordings of Toni Jo's voice at all. The radio hosts and technicians were stunned and unable to find an explanation for this eerie phenomenon. The voice truly seemed to be Toni Jo Henry's, and it was clear and unmistakable. Her message sent chills down the spines of many listeners. She spoke about her gruesome execution, the injustice she felt, and asked for forgiveness for her actions. The local community was deeply shaken. Some people firmly believed that Toni Jo Henry was trying to make contact from the afterlife. They interpreted the radio signals as a supernatural sign, that her soul had not found peace and that she was seeking redemption. Others were more skeptical and searched for logical explanations for the mysterious phenomenon, but no one could find a convincing answer. The fact is that the voice heard on the radio after Toni Jo Henry's death could not have been a recording, because further investigations revealed that no recordings of her voice existed that the station could have broadcast. So was it really Toni Jo Henry trying to reach out after her death? Is there truly such a thing as a soul that continues to exist after the physical body dies? Before we continue, a quick question for you. Do you believe that we actually continue to exist after death? Just write yes or no down in the comments. We're really excited to see your answers. Subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. It's completely free and helps us continue creating videos like this. Thank you so much. Number 14. The mysterious message from the afterlife. The following story is both deeply moving and mysterious at the same time, and seems to prove that death is not the end of our existence. After the death of her husband, a woman suddenly found a message on a piece of paper that seemed to come from the afterlife. Bonnie McEneaney, whose husband Eamon lost his life in the tragic attacks of September 11, 2001, experienced several mysterious incidents that she interpreted as signs from her deceased husband. Eamon was in the North Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, where he worked. He was in his office when the plane struck the tower and the devastating events unfolded. Eamon was one of the many innocent people who lost their lives in this tragic attack. Bonnie McEneaney recorded her experiences and beliefs in her fascinating book, in which she describes dreams, visions, and other unusual events she experienced after her husband's death. Bonnie explains in her book how, after her husband's death, she repeatedly dreamed of him. These dreams were extraordinarily vivid and gave her the strange feeling that Eamon was still with her. In some of these dreams, he seemed to comfort her and assure her that he was fine. These nighttime encounters gave Bonnie hope and strength to cope with the immense pain of her loss. In addition to the dreams, Bonnie also described various signs that she interpreted as messages from her husband. She talked about certain objects that suddenly appeared in unexpected places, or about unusual events that she believed were attempts by Eamon to communicate. These signs were proof to Bonnie that her connection to Eamon continued to exist even beyond death. One particularly powerful incident occurred when Bonnie received a direct message that she considered clear proof of her husband's continued existence. One day, Bonnie found a note in her home with the words, "Listen to your heart," a phrase her husband Eamon often said to her, and one that had deep personal meaning for her. These words were a kind of mantra that Eamon used to encourage Bonnie to listen to her inner voice and follow her heart. This note, which appeared in an inexplicable way, was overwhelming for Bonnie and confirmed her belief that Eamon was still with her. It seemed as if Eamon wanted to send her a message from the afterlife, to comfort her and show her that there is life after death. Bonnie said that it is impossible for this message to have come from anyone else, because Eamon only said those words to her when they were alone, and the sudden appearance of this note was extremely puzzling. Bonnie found the mysterious note with the words, "Listen to your heart," on the kitchen table in her home. She said she had been sitting in the kitchen thinking about her husband. When she left the room for a brief moment and returned, she found this note lying on the kitchen table. At this moment, Bonnie was alone and there was no one else in the house. Bonnie firmly believes that death is not the end and that we continue to exist afterward. She is also convinced that after death, we will see all the loved ones again who have already left us. Was it truly Eamon himself, her deceased husband, who wrote this message? Is there really life after death? A very touching story. Number 13. The incredible proof of life after death. Imagine you made a secret message or sign with someone close to you, something only the two of you would ever know. You agree that whoever dies first will deliver this message to the one who is still alive. And now imagine that this person eventually dies, and you actually receive that secret message or sign afterward. Would you then believe in life after death? That is exactly what happened to a woman who received a secret message after the death of her husband, a message they had agreed upon together. Harry Houdini, born on March 24, 1874 in Budapest, Hungary, was a celebrated illusionist and escape artist. He became famous for his astonishing escape acts, freeing himself from handcuffs, locked crates, and even water-filled containers. Despite his skepticism towards supernatural phenomena, he promised his wife Bess that he would send her a sign after his death if it were possible. Bess and Harry Houdini were determined to uncover the truth about the afterlife. They wanted to provide undeniable proof that life after death exists. For this reason, Harry Houdini and his wife Bess agreed on a special code before his death, a code consisting of 2 specific words that only the 2 of them knew. Rosabelle, believe. The word Rosabelle was the title of a song Bess loved and one that held special meaning for both of them. The word believe served to complete the message and symbolized faith in the afterlife and the possibility of communication beyond death. The code served as a method of identification. If Bess were to receive a message after Houdini's death containing those exact 2 words, she could be 100% certain that the message truly came from her husband Harry Houdini and was not the work of an imposter. After Houdini's tragic death on October 31, 1926, caused by a ruptured appendix resulting from a blow to the stomach, Bess repeatedly tried to contact him. Bess reported that she actually received the code Rosabelle, believe, during a séance. A séance is a gathering where people attempt to communicate with the deceased. A medium delivered a message to her containing the exact code she and her husband had agreed upon before his death. Bess interpreted this as a clear sign from Houdini from the afterlife. She was completely shocked and overwhelmed. From that moment on, Bess was more convinced than ever that life after death exists. Despite this proof she felt she had received, Bess continued holding seances every year on her husband's death anniversary, hoping to receive further signs from him. After 10 years, she ended the annual seances because she no longer experienced any clear contact. Some believe that after death, a person first enters a kind of intermediate realm where communication with the living is still possible. But once the soul must move on or is reborn, contact with the physical world is no longer possible. This could explain why Bess received a sign shortly after Houdini's death, and never again afterward. Because perhaps the people who have already left us have long since been reborn and may even be close to us without us realizing it. The story of Bess and Harry Houdini is truly fascinating and certainly gives you something to think about. It shows us that there is far more between heaven and earth than we humans can understand. Is this case the proof of life after death? Do we truly continue to exist after physical death? And can we even be reborn? Who knows? Number 12. The mysterious phone calls from the afterlife. Charles Peck, a 58-year-old man, died in a tragic train accident in California on September 12, 2008. A passenger train collided head-on with a freight train after the passenger train engineer overlooked a red signal. The violent collision resulted in an accident with 25 deaths and more than 135 injuries. It was one of the worst train disasters in California's history. The death of Charles Peck left deep wounds in the hearts of his fiancée, his family, and his friends. But what happened after his death was just as chilling as it was mysterious and left everyone involved with many unanswered questions. After the accident, Charles's fiancée, his parents, his brother, and his stepmother received a total of 35 phone calls over a period of 11 hours from his cell phone. These calls, all coming from the wreckage of the train, made the family hope that Charles might still be alive and desperately trying to reach them. Every time they answered the calls, however, they heard only static noise, no voice, no words, just a faint, unsettling hiss. The family and rescue teams tried desperately to trace the source of the calls, hoping to find Charles alive. But when the rescue teams discovered Charles in the wreckage of the train, he had already passed away. What was also extremely strange was the fact that his cell phone, the one the calls were made from to his fiancée and family, was never found, despite an intensive search. One might assume that once Charles Peck's body was discovered, the mysterious calls would stop. but that was not the case. His relatives reported that they continued receiving calls from his cell phone several days after his death. Charles Peck's fiancée is convinced that the calls were a sign from Charles, as if he wanted to let them know that he was still with them, even though he was no longer alive. It was as if he were trying to make contact one last time with his family to say goodbye before leaving this world for good. To this day, the mystery surrounding the calls from Charles Peck's cell phone remains unsolved. Technical experts and investigators could not find any logical explanation for how the calls were made. The extremely strange fact that Charles Peck's phone was never found adds to the mystery of this event. So was it really Charles himself trying to reach his family? But why didn't the calls stop after Charles's body was found in the wreckage of the train? And even if one assumes that Charles made the calls while he was still alive, that still doesn't explain why his family continued receiving calls from his cell phone after his death. The story of Charles Peck and the mysterious calls after his death reminds us that there are things in our world that we humans cannot understand, let alone explain. Is this puzzling case the proof that we continue to exist after physical death? Is death perhaps not the end of our existence, but the beginning of something new? A pretty interesting thought. Number 11. The mysterious message on the answering machine. Doreen Virtue, a well-known spiritual author, experienced a particularly mysterious and moving incident after the death of her father, an incident that deeply touched her and strengthened her beliefs about life after death. Shortly after her father's death, Doreen Virtue received a puzzling message on her answering machine. When she played back the message, she mainly heard static noise, but embedded within that noise, she could hear the faint yet clearly recognizable voice of her deceased father. He called her name, Doreen, in a familiar tone she recognized immediately. The message was short, but it left a deep impression on her, because it seemed as if her father were desperately trying to reach her and deliver one final message. The mixture of static noise and the faint voice gave her the impression that the message seemed to come from another level or dimension. The way her father's voice said her name brought her comfort and the certainty that he continued to exist. Doreen Virtue interpreted this unusual message as a sign from her father from the afterlife. This experience strengthened her belief that the souls of deceased people continue to exist on a spiritual level and are even capable of communicating with their loved ones. Some researchers believe that there may be a level in which souls continue to exist after physical death, and that the soul of a person may even be indestructible. The idea that the soul is immortal is based on the principle that it is made of energy, and like everything in the universe, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but only change its form. This perspective offers an interesting explanation for the mysterious messages and signs many people receive from the deceased, and it strengthens the belief in the soul's continued existence after death. Was the voice on the answering machine truly the voice of Doreen Virtue's deceased father? Is it really possible to make contact with the dead? Will we perhaps see all our loved ones again after death, the ones who have already left us? A comforting and very beautiful thought. Number 10. Reincarnation. Imagine that the life you are living right now is not your first. You may have already lived many lives, but you can no longer remember them. One of the most fascinating proofs that death is not the end of our existence is the accounts of people who can remember their past lives. These are not made-up fantasy stories, because these people report things that can be verified and that they could not possibly have known. Reincarnation is the belief that an immortal soul exists, a soul that is reborn into a new body after physical death. This interesting idea is widespread in many religions and cultures, including Hinduism, Buddhism, and several other spiritual traditions. The idea of reincarnation states that life is a cyclical process, in which the soul is born again and again in order to learn, grow, and evolve. There are numerous reports, mostly from children, who can remember their past lives. These memories often appear at a very young age and include detailed descriptions of places, people, and events they could not possibly know. These memories often fade as the children grow older. Dr. Jim B. Tucker, a renowned psychiatrist and researcher at the University of Virginia, has extensively studied the phenomena of reincarnation. Tucker focuses on cases in the United States and around the world and uses scientific methods to investigate these accounts. One extremely remarkable case that Dr. Tucker examined is the case of Cameron Macaulay. Cameron, a young boy from Scotland, began at the age of just 2 to speak of a past life on the island of Barra, even though neither he nor his family had ever been there. Cameron described in detail his former house, his family, and even a white dog he had. When his mother and Dr. Tucker verified these statements, they discovered that every detail matched an actual family on Barra, including the house and the white dog. Tucker said that this is one of the most credible cases of reincarnation he has investigated in his long career. Cameron knew things he could not possibly have known, and all the statements he made were thoroughly examined and, incredibly, proven to be true. Another very credible case that Dr. Tucker studied is the case of Luke Ruhlman. Luke Ruhlman, a young boy from Cincinnati, Ohio, began as a toddler to speak about his past life as a woman named Pam Robinson. He said that in a former life he had lived in Chicago and died in a terrible fire. Luke's mother, Erica, researched and discovered that there truly was a woman named Pam Robinson who died in 1993 in a fire at the Paxton Hotel in Chicago. Luke was able to recall astonishing details about Pam's life and death that he could not possibly have known. This story sparked great interest and led many people to begin believing in the possibility of reincarnation. Erica was deeply impressed by the detailed memories of her son. Luke described how, as Pam, he died in a massive fire and then entered the heavenly realm. Dr. Tucker compared Luke Ruhlman's statements with the actual events of 1993 and concluded that everything Luke had described about Pam was true. This incredible fact greatly increased Luke's credibility. The story became so well known that it was even featured on a TV show about paranormal phenomena. Dr. Tucker emphasized that in many of these cases, the children's memories are too specific and too accurate to be dismissed as coincidence or imagination. Tucker said that it is essentially impossible to explain cases like those of Luke Ruhlman or Cameron Macaulay without considering the possibility of reincarnation. What Dr. Tucker is really telling us is that these cases are very likely genuine evidence of reincarnation. So does reincarnation truly exist? Is death not the end, but at the same time the beginning of a new life? A very fascinating thought. Number 9. The mysterious emails from the afterlife. Jack Froese, a cheerful and humorous man, died in June 2011 at the age of 32 from a sudden heart attack. His early death left a painful void in the hearts of his friends and family members who struggled greatly to cope with the loss. But the story took an eerie turn that made many people think deeply. Several months after Jack's death, his friends and family members suddenly received messages from his email address. These messages were not just simple greetings, but contained specific information and private jokes that only Jack himself could have known. The incredible fact that these emails seemed to come from someone who had passed away caused great confusion and astonishment. One particularly remarkable example was an email received by one of Jack's best friends. The message carried the subject line, "I'm watching," and referred to a conversation they had shortly before Jack's death. In that conversation, Jack had joked that he would always keep an eye on his friend, even if he were no longer around. This specific reference to a very personal discussion left his family and friends amazed. Jack's friend, who had received this mysterious email, replied and asked who he was, explaining that Jack was no longer alive, but he never received a response. Some believed that Jack might have written these emails while he was still alive and programmed them to be sent automatically after his death. It is indeed possible to write emails and schedule them to be sent at a specific time in the future. However, this theory seems extremely unlikely because Jack died suddenly and unexpectedly. Since he did not know he was going to die, he could not have known when these pre-written emails should be sent. To put an end to the email mystery and find out who was truly sending these messages, Jack's family hired a cybercrime specialist who was supposed to determine the source of the emails. Now the story becomes even more mysterious than it already was. Investigators discovered that the emails were definitely written and sent after the death of Jack Froese, and they were not pre-written or scheduled messages. All emails were sent from Jack's personal computer. There were also no signs that anyone else had accessed Jack's email account. But Jack's parents testified that Jack's computer had not been used or turned on since his death, and that no one had access to it. The computer wasn't even plugged into a power outlet. So how was it possible to send emails from a computer that wasn't operating? Was it truly the deceased Jack himself who tried to contact his loved ones by email from the afterlife? Quite fascinating, but also a bit unsettling. Number 8. The mirror, the gateway to the afterlife. Is it possible to use a mirror to make contact with the deceased? This exciting question is one that a man explored intensively, leading him to develop a technique that allows a connection to the afterlife to be established. Dr. Raymond Moody, a well-known researcher in the field of near-death experiences, developed a special method to communicate with the deceased. This method, the psychomantium, is based on ancient traditions and is meant to allow people to establish visual and auditory contact with beings from the other side. The psychomantium is a specially designed room that contains a large mirror. This mirror is positioned in such a way that the person looking into it can relax comfortably and enter a meditative state. The room is often dimly lit to create a calming and focused atmosphere. Mirror gazing, the act of staring into a mirror, is an ancient practice, used by both the Greeks and the Romans. People sit in front of the mirror and allow their minds to become still. By intensely gazing into the mirror and immersing themselves in their own thoughts, they can receive visual impressions or even audible messages from the deceased. The ancient Greeks had a practice called catoptromancy, in which one gazes into a reflective surface. This form of divination involved looking into mirrors or reflective surfaces such as water to receive visions and messages. They believed that these reflections could serve as portals through which they could communicate with gods, spirits, or the deceased. The famous Oracle of Delphi, an ancient Greek sacred site, used similar techniques, with priestesses gazing into reflective objects to receive divine revelations. The ancient Romans adopted many traditions from the Greeks. For the Romans, mirrors were more than just everyday objects. They were viewed as tools to connect with the afterlife and receive divine messages. The ancient Greeks and Romans had a deep understanding of symbolism and the power of reflection. They believed that mirrors and other reflective surfaces could offer access to another reality or dimension. These practices were often used in ritual contexts to receive answers from higher powers or gain spiritual insight. These ancient practices inspired Dr. Moody, who then developed the psychomantium to help people process grief and establish a connection to their deceased loved ones. This method can offer deep emotional healing and provide the sense that contact with the deceased is truly possible. Many people who have tried the psychomantium report astonishing experiences. Some actually see images or figures in the mirror that they identify as their deceased loved ones. Others hear voices or feel a strong presence in the room. These experiences can be extremely intense and moving, deeply influencing one's understanding of life and death. So is it truly possible to use a mirror to make contact with the deceased? Very fascinating, but also a bit eerie. Number 7. The ghost signals. Is it possible to use a radio to establish a connection to another dimension or even the afterlife? That is exactly the intriguing question at the center of this case. Guglielmo Marconi, who invented the radio in 1895, made a series of mysterious discoveries during his experiments that no one has been able to explain to this day. While he was working on developing and improving radio technology, he encountered strange signals for which he could find no explanation. It is claimed that Marconi received eerie voices and messages. These unsettling transmissions led to a variety of interesting theories and fascinated people around the world. During his experiments, Marconi received mysterious signals that did not originate from any known transmitter. These signals were irregular and did not appear to have a human source. Marconi himself was both fascinated and irritated by these inexplicable receptions. Although he found no explanation for them, he documented the puzzling incidents and tried to determine their origin. Some believe that the signals were caused by natural phenomena such as atmospheric disturbances, cosmic background radiation, or electromagnetic anomalies. But many were not satisfied with this explanation and pointed out that these signals contained audible voices. Others speculated that the signals might come from extraterrestrial civilizations, attempting to make contact with Earth. This theory was supported by the fact that radio waves are considered an effective means of interstellar communication. But by far the most fascinating theory suggests that these signals could come from deceased souls trying to make contact with the living through radio waves. This theory gained popularity and sparked intense discussions about whether radio waves could truly create a bridge to the afterlife. Spiritual mediums and followers of Spiritism were particularly drawn to this idea. They began using radios in seances and spiritual sessions in the hope of receiving messages from the deceased. Reports of whispering voices, eerie static, and strange sounds that were actually recorded during these sessions shocked the entire world. There is a method called instrumental transcommunication, which uses electronic devices such as radios, televisions, and computers to receive messages from the deceased or beings from other dimensions. Some people are convinced that these devices can serve as a bridge between our world and the afterlife. There are many reports of voices, images, and texts that suddenly appear on devices without any identifiable cause. There are cases in which people asked a question and recorded the moment with an audio device. When they later listened to the recording, a strange voice could be heard whispering an answer, even though no one else was present during the recording. Pretty creepy. Another example includes reports of short messages like "hello" or a specific name suddenly appearing on the screen of a turned-off computer. Although there is still no clear proof that the signals Marconi received actually originated from deceased souls, the phenomenon remains a fascinating mystery. The ghost signals, as they were called, are a significant chapter in the history of radio technology and the study of the supernatural. Marconi's experiments show us that there are things in our world that no one can explain. Can radio waves really establish a connection to the afterlife, or even to another dimension? Are we humans perhaps not the only intelligent beings in the universe using this technology? Or are these mysterious signals the result of phenomena that we humans simply cannot understand, let alone explain? Number 6. Are déjà vu experiences memories from previous lives? Have you ever had that strange feeling that you have already experienced a specific situation, even though you are absolutely certain you are experiencing it for the first time? Or have you ever visited a place that somehow felt familiar, even though you had never been there before? Such strange experiences are known as déjà vu. There was a woman who studied this mysterious phenomenon in great depth and discovered that déjà vu experiences may actually be memories from previous lives, or even from parallel worlds. The woman we are talking about was named Dolores Cannon. She was a highly respected hypnotherapist who gained worldwide recognition for her work in regression therapy. With her extraordinary ability to guide people under hypnosis into deeper levels of consciousness, she made fascinating discoveries about past lives and parallel realities. In her numerous books, she shares the astonishing stories and insights she collected throughout her long career. Dolores Cannon specialized in regression therapy, a technique in which people are guided under hypnosis back into past lives. Through these sessions, her clients were able to access memories of previous lives. These memories were often very detailed and seemed to offer glimpses into different historical eras and cultures that the clients had not known before. In her books, Dolores Cannon describes numerous case studies from clients who told astonishing stories while under hypnosis. One of these cases involved a woman who remembered a life in ancient Egypt, where she served as a priestess. Another client spoke of a life in a futuristic society on another planet. These stories not only offered fascinating insights into past lives, but also into alternative existences and realities. Because Dolores Cannon also discovered that some of her clients had memories of parallel worlds. But what exactly are parallel realities? Parallel realities, also known as parallel worlds, are concepts from quantum physics and theoretical physics. These theories suggest that alongside our known reality, countless other realities exist, in which endless alternative versions of ourselves follow different life paths. Every decision we make creates a new reality in which a different outcome occurs. In a parallel reality, your life could be completely different from the one you are living now. You might have chosen a different career, lived in another place, or had a different partner by your side. Dolores Cannon believed that the phenomenon of déjà vu, the feeling of having already experienced a situation, could be connected to memories from these parallel realities or from past lives. When people experience déjà vu, it might be that they are unconsciously establishing a connection to a parallel reality, or that memories from past lives surface in which they had already lived through a similar situation. Who knows? Maybe we have already lived many lives that we simply can't remember anymore. Number 5. Is consciousness immortal? Is there a form of consciousness that continues to exist after death? What really happens to us when we die? These are the intriguing questions that these two men studied in depth, and they appear to have found an answer. What these researchers discovered will definitely surprise you. Dr. Stuart Hameroff, a renowned physician and professor at the University of Arizona, explored the fascinating question of how human consciousness works. Together with the well-known physicist Sir Roger Penrose, he developed a revolutionary theory that elevates our understanding of consciousness to an entirely new level. They believe that our consciousness exists on the quantum level and that it may continue to exist beyond physical death. The quantum level is the area of physics that deals with the smallest particles, such as atoms and electrons. In this realm, particles behave in very strange ways. They can be in two places at the same time, or suddenly disappear and reappear elsewhere. This is called superposition. Hameroff and Penrose propose that consciousness arises through special processes taking place inside the cells of our brain. These cells contain tiny structures called microtubules. The researchers believe that these microtubules function like small computers operating through quantum physics. An important part of their theory is quantum coherence. This means that tiny particles can exist in several states simultaneously until they are measured or observed. Imagine you have a wall with two narrow slits, and you fire an electron toward it. In the quantum world, the electron does not pass through just one slit. It passes through both at the same time. Only when you measure which slit it actually went through does the electron choose one of the two possibilities. Until the moment of measurement, both options exist simultaneously. Hameroff and Penrose believe that such states occur inside the cells of our brain and generate our consciousness. A fascinating idea within this theory is that consciousness could continue to exist after death. If our consciousness truly operates on the quantum level, the information that makes up our personality might remain in the universe even after our body dies. But if consciousness continues after death, what does that mean for our understanding of life and death? What really happens to us when we die? We humans view death as the final end of our existence. Our body stops functioning, and with that, our consciousness ends as well. But if consciousness continues to exist on the quantum level, we might preserve a part of ourselves beyond death. This idea opens up the fascinating possibility that what defines us as individuals, our thoughts, memories, and emotions, does not disappear but continues in some form. According to the theory of Hameroff and Penrose, the information of our consciousness could transition into the universe after death. This information would no longer be bound to our physical body, but would instead become integrated into a kind of quantum field. This quantum field could contain all the fundamental data of our consciousness. If our consciousness is more than just a function of our brain, we could begin to view death not as an absolute end, but as a transition into another form of existence. Who knows? Perhaps these two researchers are right, and we humans are, in truth, immortal beings. Number 4. Can consciousness exist independently of the brain? Dr. Pim van Lommel, a renowned cardiologist and scientist, extensively studied the intriguing question of whether consciousness can exist independently of the brain. But what exactly is consciousness, and how does it arise in the first place? Is consciousness produced by the brain, or is it something that can exist independently of the physical body? Consciousness is the state in which we experience our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. It includes everything we feel and think, and it is unique to every person. Researchers assume that consciousness arises through complex processes in our brain. The self is our sense of personal identity and continuity. It enables us to perceive ourselves, reflect on who we are, and remember past experiences. Scientists believe that the self is created through the interaction of certain regions of the brain. Our social and cultural experiences also shape who we ultimately become. Dr. von Lommel conducted extensive studies on patients who survived cardiac arrest. During cardiac arrest, the heart stops beating and blood flow to the brain is interrupted. In theory, consciousness should not be present during this time. Nevertheless, many patients reported clear and detailed experiences after being revived, experiences they said occurred during the time of their clinical death. These experiences, also known as near-death experiences, often included out-of-body experiences, encounters with deceased relatives, and the perception of a bright light. An out-of-body experience is when a person feels as though they have left their physical body and are observing the world from the outside. During a near-death experience, some people also report meeting deceased relatives or other beings and even communicating with them. Seeing a bright light at the end of a tunnel is also a commonly reported element of near-death experiences. Some researchers believe that these mysterious phenomena occurring during a near-death experience may be caused by a lack of oxygen. It is assumed that the brain may simply be producing these strange impressions, perhaps even as a kind of protective mechanism to make dying easier. But this theory does not explain why some individuals report detailed events that occurred in other locations. They knew things they could not possibly have known. Even though they were clinically dead, they were able to recount the exact content of conversations that took place, for example, in another room of the hospital. They reported that during their death, they left their physical body and were able to observe it from the outside. Some people are convinced that near-death experiences offer a glimpse into what will happen after death, and that physical death is not the end of our existence. Dr. Pim van Lommel's studies suggest that consciousness can exist even without brain activity. These findings challenge the established scientific assumptions about the nature of consciousness. Because if consciousness can indeed exist independently of the physical body, then consciousness continues after death. So is death not the end? Is it perhaps even the beginning of something new, something completely unknown? A very fascinating thought. Number 3. The terrifying plane crash. Do you believe in miracles? If not, you will definitely change your mind after the following story. This case is almost impossible to believe, yet it truly happened. A 17-year-old fell from about 3,000 meters out of a plane, straight into the jungle, and survived. Most people have been on a plane at least once, whether to fly to a long-awaited vacation or to visit relatives in other countries. Numerous statistics show that airplanes are much safer compared to other modes of transportation such as trains, cars, or ships. But when a plane accident does happen, it often has severe consequences for the passengers and the crew. Juliane Koepcke, a 17-year-old German teenager at the time, survived on December 24, 1971, as the sole survivor of the crash of Lanza Flight 508 in the Peruvian jungle. Her incredible experience is not only an impressive survival story, but also shaped by mysterious events that influenced her survival. The plane was traveling from Lima, Peru, to Pucallpa when it entered a severe thunderstorm. A lightning strike hit the aircraft and caused it to crash. The plane broke apart in midair, and Juliane, still strapped into her seat, fell about 3,000 meters into the jungle. In a miraculous way, she survived the fall with only minor injuries. Juliane's mother was also on board the plane. Maria Koepcke, a well-known ornithologist, was traveling with her daughter from Lima to Pucallpa to celebrate Christmas. Unfortunately, Maria Koepcke did not survive the crash. Juliane later even found her lifeless body. When Juliane's father, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke, who had not been on the flight, learned about the tragic crash, he was deeply shocked. In his desperation, he tried to establish mental contact with his daughter Juliane and his wife Maria. He focused intensely on sending his thoughts to them, hoping they would sense his presence and support. Injured and alone in the dense, dangerous jungle, Juliane began her 11-day journey in search of help. During this time, she was accompanied by a deep feeling of guidance, which she attributed to her father. Her father, a biologist, had taught her many survival skills for the wilderness, and Juliane had the strange feeling that he truly was with her during this difficult time, as if he were communicating with her directly. Juliane repeatedly reported moments in which she was convinced that her father was giving her hints that helped her survive and find the right path. Her father supposedly told her, for example, to follow rivers in order to eventually reach people. This information helped her find a direction and make her way through the dense jungle. Despite her injuries and the extreme conditions, she managed to persevere and rely on her father's guidance. After 11 days, Juliane discovered a hut belonging to lumber workers, who eventually rescued her and brought her to the nearest town. Her story of survival and rescue became known worldwide and inspired many people. The mystical connection to her father, which ultimately enabled her survival, gave her story a deeper meaning. Did Hans Wilhelm Koepcke truly establish telepathic contact with his daughter to save her? Is there some kind of spirit capable of leaving the body and traveling to distant places? That would mean that our consciousness is not bound to our physical body, and that physical death is not the end of our existence. Number 2. The Butterfly and the White Feathers. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross was a Swiss-American psychiatrist and pioneer in the study of death and dying, and in her groundbreaking book, On Death and Dying, she documented numerous cases, in which dying individuals and their loved ones received signs and messages from the deceased. One particularly recurring symbol in these accounts was the butterfly, often interpreted as a symbol of transformation and the continued existence of the soul. These signs gave comfort and hope to those affected in their final moments and helped their loved ones cope with their loss. In many of these stories, the butterfly played a central role. The butterfly was often seen near the dying or shortly after their death, and it was regarded as a powerful symbol of transformation and rebirth. In many cultures, the butterfly is considered a sign of the soul's immortality and the transition into a new life. In Greek mythology, the word psyche means both soul and butterfly. Psyche is also the name of the Greek goddess of the soul, who is often depicted with butterfly wings. In addition to butterflies, there are countless reports of people finding white feathers in unusual places after the death of a loved one. These feathers are often interpreted as signs that the deceased is somehow nearby. White feathers are symbols of purity, protection, and spiritual presence in many cultures, and their unexpected appearance can give comfort and the assurance that loved ones are still watching over them. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross discovered many other fascinating aspects of dying and the afterlife during her many years of research. People who were close to physical death reported seeing loved ones who had already passed away or spiritual beings. It appeared as though these beings and deceased relatives were communicating with the dying and waiting for them, to accompany them in the transition from this world to the next. Kübler-Ross found it remarkable that at this moment, all fears and doubts of the dying person suddenly vanished. Even people who had great fear of dying and were panicked became calm and peaceful in their final moments. Many people who had a near-death experience and essentially returned from the dead reported mostly positive experiences and said that there is nothing to fear. So is there truly no reason to fear death, and what comes afterward? Are butterflies that are seen near dying individuals, or white feathers found after the death of a loved one, truly signs from the deceased from the afterlife? What exactly are they trying to tell us? Are they perhaps trying to let us know that life continues after death and that they are waiting for us? A wonderful thought, imagining that we will see our loved ones again after we die. Number 1. Clarity before death. Michael Nahm, an experienced researcher, has studied a fascinating phenomenon in depth, in which patients show unexpected clarity and mental alertness shortly before their death. This phenomenon appears in people who have suffered for years from dementia or other cognitive impairments, and it is interpreted as a possible indication of consciousness existing beyond the physical body. Nahm's studies document numerous cases in which patients who had long suffered from severe cognitive limitations such as dementia suddenly regained remarkable mental alertness and clarity shortly before their death. This sudden mental clarity, also known as terminal lucidity, often appears in the patient's ability to speak clearly again, remember important details, and even engage in meaningful conversations with their loved ones. Dementia is a condition that affects the brain and leads to a progressive loss of mental abilities. Dementia typically affects older individuals. The risk of developing dementia increases with age, with most cases occurring in people over 65. The causes of dementia are mainly linked to damage and changes in the brain, often due to illnesses such as Alzheimer's or vascular problems that impair blood flow to the brain. People with dementia have difficulty remembering, thinking clearly, making decisions, and managing daily tasks. For those affected, it is often confusing and frightening as they lose themselves in their own world. For loved ones, it is especially painful to watch someone slowly fade away and to cope with the emotional and practical challenges that caregiving brings. One remarkable example documented by Michael Nahm is the case of an elderly woman who had suffered from severe dementia for many years and could hardly communicate. But shortly before her death, she surprised her family by speaking clearly, recalling details from her life and saying goodbye. Such cases cannot be explained by the known medical reasons for dementia or other cognitive disorders. These unexpected moments of mental clarity raise many questions about the nature of consciousness and its dependence on the physical brain. It is suspected that this sudden clarity shortly before death may be connected to the consciousness or soul gradually detaching from the dying body. In this process, the limitations of the physical body that are responsible for conditions such as dementia fall away. This could make it possible for affected individuals to regain mental clarity and alertness shortly before death, before their soul finally leaves the body and begins its journey into the afterlife. Nahm's research suggests that consciousness may not be bound to the physical structures of the brain. These observations support the idea that consciousness may have a deeper, perhaps even independent form of existence. Even though we do not know what will happen after death, there are many compelling indications that the death of the body is likely not the end of our existence. Now, We look forward to hearing your personal thoughts on this. Is there life after death? Do you believe in the existence of an immortal soul? And which case fascinated you the most? Feel free to share your thoughts below in the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.